Hi guys, this is Taylor. So, completely different setup today. My room is a little bit too noisy to film in today, long story short, but I am here today to do my March wrap-up. So I said that I read a lot in February. I somehow read even more this month, even though this semester is really ramping up and I feel like there was a whole week in March where I didn't even really touch a book. I got through 9 books in March, and that is a whole lot for me. I don't even really know how this happened. I did have a TBR for this month. March was my birthday month, so I decided to read all my favorite authors as a treat to myself. I was really in pursuit of a 5-star read this month, and I'm happy to report that that was a successful endeavor. Not quite in the way that I expected, but I'll take it. But let me just jump right into my favorite authors TBR and how that all panned out. So the first book for my TBR that I completed in March was Welcome to the Monkey House by Kurt Vonnegut. This is a short story collection, by far his most well-known, but unfortunately this was one from my TBR that I was a little bit disappointed by. I enjoyed a lot of these stories, actually the vast majority I would say. A few of them I really even loved, and they kind of reignited that same spark that I first felt when I started reading Vonnegut, so that was nice. However, and I got this same feeling the last time I read Vonnegut as well, so maybe it's just me getting older, but I did feel like with some stories they were just trying too hard to get under my skin in an inflammatory way, not even in a useful, productive way. And there were also a few stories in here, not too many, but a couple that I just didn't really connect with much at all. So I had a lot of varying feelings for the different stories in this collection, but I think it all evened out to about a 3-star read for me. For my TBR, the next book that I finished was After Dark by Haruki Murakami. If you watched my TBR video, you might remember that this is the one that I actually had the lowest expectations for. I had heard pretty mediocre things about it across the board, but I actually really enjoyed this one. This follows the events of a single late night in Tokyo, and it ends right when the sun rises. We mainly follow 2 young people who meet in a Denny's in the middle of the night, and we also kind of follow other characters who are drawn into their story. This, I feel like, is a very low-key Murakami. It's not very plot heavy. It's all kind of based on the feeling of being up really late at night in a big city and just the way that things kind of change and feel different. I really appreciated that. I liked how, from my perspective at least, this is all kind of about one shared human experience. It's also like a little creepy and a little just kind of hard to put your finger on the exact feeling, but I really enjoyed this one. I gave After Dark a 4 out of 5 stars. The next one that I read from my TBR was The Assassination of Brungwayn Spurge by M.T. Anderson with illustrations by Eugene Yelchin. This is a satirical middle grade novel, and as expected, it was totally delightful. We follow a spy from an elf kingdom who is supposed to be an honored guest in a goblin kingdom, and naturally these 2 races hate each other and they've been at war for years. Something really cool about this novel is that the illustrations are deliberately at odds with the text. This was a concept that the author and illustrator agreed on before the story was even conceived of, and you'll definitely see why if you pick this up, but it's such a cool idea and it adds a lot to the story. Overall, this book is very much about how we view the other. So other races, other people in different circumstances, what have you. So it's a very timely book, and I think that it expresses its message very effectively. I gave The Assassination of Brungwayn Spurge 4 stars, and really the only reason that I docked it is because I did have a little bit of a hard time getting into the fantasy aspect of it. Fantasy is really not a genre for me, but in every other regard this was fantastic and I definitely recommend it. And the last book that I read for my favorite authors TBR was The Brief and Frightening Reign of Phil by George Saunders. So I would call this one a novella. It's about 130 pages, and we followed the politics of 2 countries called Inner Horner and Outer Horner. Inner Horner is so small that it can only occupy 1 citizen at a time, and the 2 countries are basically cordoned off with a piece of string. Actually, this came to have a lot of the same themes as The Assassination of Brungwayn Spurge. This is a very pointed commentary about how we view one another. And beyond that, it looks at things like borders and fascism and how history tends to repeat itself. While reading most of this, it was really feeling like a 4-star read, and then the ending really got me in a significant way. So I'm very excited to announce that The Brief and Frightening Reign of Phil by George Saunders is my first 5-star read of 2019, and I also really recommend this one if it sounds like your thing. So in addition to the 4 books that I read from my favorite authors TBR, I also read 5 other things this month, which is batty. Chronologically, the first book that I actually read in the month of March was actually The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is set in 2025 and it's essentially post-apocalyptic. The world is completely overrun by violence and our main character lives in a gated community that is just on the brink of collapse. So I had a very unique reaction to this book, one that I don't think I've ever had from a book before. For me, this was so unbelievably bleak and horrific that it actually became totally unenjoyable. It's kind of bizarre because I read plenty of really heavy books, but none have ever really affected me the way that this one did. I didn't want to pick this up. I had to switch over to audio because I couldn't bring myself to, and this book just really kind of continues to weigh on me. In this world, there is a real emphasis on rape as just the thing that happens to women, and I wonder if it has something to do with that aspect. Having said that, this is kind of an undeniably good book. The voice was outstanding, and Octavia Butler seems like an incredible author, honestly. I just did not have a good time reading this book, and I can't really see myself picking up another one of hers. My rating for this one might be a little confusing because I actually gave this 4 stars. Because like I said, I think it's a great book. It was just so bleak that I don't really see myself re-engaging with this author kind of as a way of looking out for myself. I also finished The Island of Sea Women by Lisa See, and this one came out right at the beginning of the month. This is historical fiction set on the Korean island of Jeju, where there were all-female diving collectives and a society completely centered around women as the breadwinners of their households. This focuses on our main character Young-suk and her closest childhood friend as they grow up and experience World War II and the Korean War. I have a lot of thoughts about this one. Right off the bat, it seemed very, very well researched, very detailed, but it did kind of venture into info dump kind of territory at times. The setting was very interesting, given that this was a lifestyle that I knew nothing about before I read this book. But in terms of the plot and execution, I thought it was kind of basic and something that I've really kind of seen from this author before. Something that this author did surprise me with was how bloody and horrific she was willing to go with the war crimes. I know that much of this story is based on real events, and I'm sure that she wanted to, convey the atrocities of war, but I was still surprised just given the other books that I've read by this author. Jeju does have a very distinct bloody history that I knew nothing about before reading this book, so I do really appreciate her for shedding light on this part of history. Overall, this one was about a 3 or a 3.5 star for me, just based on the execution of it, but I definitely learned a whole new part of history, and I definitely have to give credit for that. Next up, I read the 3rd volume of the Eternal editions of the Sailor Moon manga. This came out on my birthday. Really, really quickly, these editions continue to be amazing. I love collecting them. This particular volume does cover a part of the storyline that does tend to drag for me quite a bit. So this one was a 4 star and not a perfect 5 star. But again, this reprint is amazing. I love owning them and I can't wait to have them all in my collection. This month I also got my hands on the Handmaid's Tale graphic novel. This was adapted by Renee Nault. I thought that this was a near perfect adaptation, honestly. In terms of the art, everything was almost exactly as I pictured it in my mind's eye, so that was amazing. The color palette with the emphasis on red is so good and so well done. And this adaptation kept all of my favorite quotes from the novel, so it really kept that voice and that intelligence. I just love this as a graphic novel. I did feel weird giving it a perfect 5-star just based on the fact that it is adapted from a novel. Maybe that's not a valid reason, but I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. And the last thing I finished in March, I actually just finished last night, and that was We by Evgeny Zamyatin. I have wanted to read this for so long, just based on the fact that I do tend to really like classic dystopians, and this served as a direct inspiration for 1984. In this dystopia, freedom is considered to be disorganized wildness, and society is known as one state. There is no individuality, there is only we. I actually had a pretty hard time understanding what was going on in this dystopia, kind of what was going on in general. This was written in a way that was a lot more dreamlike than I anticipated, and the whole thing kind of felt untethered to reality in a way that didn't really help it. I didn't get a whole lot out of this one, unfortunately, and maybe that's just me, but I liked its ideas, the ones that I could understand, and I have to give it credit for being the predecessor to so many other great dystopian novels. So I think I'm giving this one about a 3-star. So that was March. Question mark. I have no idea how I managed to read so much this month, but it turned out pretty okay, I guess. Definitely let me know what you read this month, the best of the month, the worst of the month. I'm interested to know. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!